In January, she gave up her position as governor of South Carolina to represent the United States at the United Nations because she knew she could make a difference. In January, she gave up her position as governor of South Carolina to represent Israel at the United Nations because she knew she could make a difference. Less than two weeks ago, Ambassador Haley once again responded to an attack on Israel, demanding that the UN retract a report that viciously and outrageously attacked Israel as an apartheid state.
The bigger question is it just racial discrimination, or is it, does it together make up a system of apartheid? The report looks at the definition of the apartheid as it comes in the Apartheid Convention, looks at the three major conditions: the inhumane acts, the fact that it is done within an institutionalized regime, and third, that those acts are committed with the intention of maintaining this apartheid regime. And based on the evidence, the authors concluded that Israel has imposed an apartheid regime on the Palestinian people wherever they reside, whether they are in Israel or in the occupied territories or in the diaspora.
So please join me in welcoming the agent of that change, the United States Ambassador to the United States, the Honorable Nikki Haley.
Well, I am the daughter of Indian parents who reminded my brothers, my sister, and me every day how blessed we were to live in this country. And the truth is, I have seen so many similarities between the Israeli culture and the Indian culture.
How do we hold Iran accountable for the deal and for the threats it's posing?
It's concerning, and the reason it's concerning is because when the Iran deal took place, all it did was empower Iran, and it empowered Russia. And it emboldened Iran to feel like they could get away with more. So the goal was have the backs of our allies. Never again do what we saw happen with Resolution 2334 and make anyone question our support.
The last thing this woman wants is for you to know what Resolution 2334 even is, as all it stands for is Israel to stop its flagrant violation of international law with its illegal occupation and expansion.
When Resolution 2334 happened and the U.S. abstained, the entire country felt a kick in the gut. We had just done something that showed the United States at its weakest point ever. Never do we not have the backs of our friends.
As all it stands for is Israel to stop its flagrant violation of international law with its illegal occupation and expansion.
And to see that happen was not only embarrassing, it was hurtful. And so what I can tell you is everyone at the United Nations is scared to talk to me about Resolution 2334.
Right, idiot, yes.
And I wanted them to know that, look, that happened, but it will never happen again. So for anyone that says you can't get anything done at the UN, they need to know there's a new sheriff in town. If you challenge us, be prepared for what you're challenging us for, because we will respond.
You're a pimple on society's ass!
So when they decided to try and put a Palestinian in one of the highest positions that had ever been given at the UN, we said no, and we had him booted out. So then they tested us again. And a ridiculous report, the Falk report, came out. I don't know who the guy is or what he's about, but he's got serious problems. Goes and compares Israel to an apartheid state.
Let me break down the reality. Israel is already an apartheid state. In fact, instances of institutionalized segregation in the country abound. For starters, Israel has a permit system, which restricts travel for ethnic Palestinians in the West Bank, limiting where they can live unless they obtain permits from the Israeli government. These checkpoints aren't all that dissimilar from South Africa's pass system, which restricted movement for blacks. In regard to the limited mobility of Palestinians, former U.S. President Jimmy Carter said in 2006 that, quote, when Israel occupies territory deep within the West Bank and connects the 200 or so settlements with each other with a road, and then prohibits the Palestinians from using that road, or in many cases even crossing it, this perpetuates even worse instances of apartness or apartheid than we witnessed even in South Africa. Somewhere around 90,000 Arabs live in the 176 unrecognized villages inside Israel. The inhabitants of these villages are considered internal refugees, displaced after the 1948 war, having fled their homes with nowhere else to go. And being unrecognized by Israel means that tens of thousands of Arab residents have no access to public services like water, roads, education, healthcare, or even electricity. But hey, we have to be careful, not get carried away and start comparing Israel to South Africa, right? I mean, come on. It's not like Israel was forcibly injecting African immigrants with birth control, some sort of nuanced eugenics program. Oh, wait, yes, apparently as many as 130,000 Ethiopian women were forcibly sterilized, according to Haaretz, dropping the birth rate of Ethiopian Israelis by 20%. All right, but at least Israel didn't uphold a law banning Palestinians from living with their spouses in Israel, right? Oh, wait, they did. Despite human rights organizations calling the ruling racist, Israel's Supreme Court has legally prevented thousands of individuals in the West Bank and Gaza from living with their spouses in Israel. All right, fine. But at the very least, there aren't any parts of Israel that would introduce racially segregated schools, right? Unfortunately, they're doing that too. Last summer, children in South Tel Aviv attended preschool classes segregated by race. So, knowing all of this, is it really any wonder why we're seeing growing support for the Israel Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions Movement, or BDS, where just like South Africa, an international movement is galvanizing to divest and boycott Israel for its apartheid system. So, given the emotional reaction to anyone simply criticizing the Israeli government, these unpopular truths are rarely discussed. But I think it's about time we call a spade a spade. Call it segregation, call it racism, call it what you will. But institutionalized discrimination and systematic oppression over any group based on race is the definition of apartheid.
And literally listening to each member say the same thing over and over again, I knew they said it was bad, but until you hear it and you see it, you just can't comprehend how ridiculous it is.
This is the thing that's flipping me out right now. What? Everything we've seen for 2 days, with people we talk to, it's, I mean, I'm touched by that. I know that story. I know that, but this is really bizarre.
Yes.
This is genuinely strange.
What? It's a dead city?
It's the dead city, but who owns the city?
Yeah.
And their feeling of, I'm protected, I can do whatever I want.
Exactly.
And that sense of where the boundaries are. I mean, it's exactly what the Old South was in America. Blacks knew where they could go. They could drink from that fountain. They couldn't go over there. They couldn't eat in that place. It was well understood. You didn't cross it when you get your head beat in or you get lynched.
I want to quote from your first public remarks as ambassador. You said,
the Security Council is supposed to discuss how to maintain international peace and security. But at our meeting on the Middle East, The discussion was not about Hezbollah's illegal buildup of rockets in Lebanon. It was not about the money and weapons Iran provides to terrorists. It was not about how we defeat ISIS. It was not about how we hold Bashar al-Assad accountable for the slaughter of hundreds and thousands of civilians. No, instead the meeting focused on criticizing Israel, the one true democracy in the Middle East.
First of all, there is discrimination. There are two groups. There are Jews, settlers, and Palestinians. There are two separate legal systems for the settlers and for Palestinians. Secondly, there's clear repression. There is torture applied in respect of Palestinian militants. Checkpoints restrict freedom of movement at every level. There's detention without trial. There are the same forms of political repression that we experienced in apartheid South Africa.
I am new around here, but I understand that's how the Council has operated month after month for decades. I'm here to say the United States will not turn a blind eye to this anymore. I am here to underscore the ironclad support of the United States for Israel.
Last question. I think this crowd would be thrilled to hear you for hours, but we're going to, days, weeks, months. You, when you were governor of South Carolina, signed into law the first anti-BDS legislation signed in any state capital in South Carolina, any state capital in America. This is an issue that is close to your heart. Now, with your new position, what do you think could be done to continue and escalate the fight against those who want to delegitimize Israel through the BDS movement?
I think we have to show how absurd it is. We have to basically show, just in common sense terms, if you want to boycott North Korea, I get it. If you want to have divestments and pull something away from Syria, do it. If you want to talk about other issues that we're dealing with, I can understand that. But Israel? So with the BDS movement that we were able to stop in South Carolina, we're going to continue to take that to the UN. So with the BDS movement that we were able to stop in South Carolina, we're going to continue to take that to the UN.
As a new report out by Human Rights Watch has confirmed that Israeli security forces routinely abuse Palestinian children, subjecting them to unlawful detentions, beatings, and interrogations. Even just this afternoon, the Israeli government approved an additional 300 illegal settlements to be built by Jewish settlers in the occupied territory of the West Bank. And as the movement to support freedom and justice in Palestine in the United States grows, one man, investigative journalist and author Chris Hedges, has come out with a new piece endorsing the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement against the Israeli state. In it, he writes, quote, "Sanctions brought down the apartheid regime of South Africa, and they are what will bring down the apartheid regime of Israel." I spoke earlier with Hedges about his position, and I started by asking him why he's come out with this article now.
Well, it's 1 year, roughly, since the last Israeli assault, 51-day assault on Gaza. Nothing's been rebuilt. 1.8 million Palestinians in Gaza still live in what amounts to one of the most horrific open-air prisons in the country. 80% of families depend on Islamic or international relief agencies to survive. This misery isn't going to stop, clearly, until there is a mass movement to make it stop. And just as a mass movement brought down the apartheid regime in South Africa through sanctions, the only mechanism we have left by which we are going to bring down the apartheid regime in Israel is the movement known as boycott, divestment, and sanctions of Israel. And we've already seen institutions from churches like the Presbyterian Church, colleges, all sorts of institutions across Europe that are latching onto this mechanism as a way to prohibit the Israelis from continuing the repression and indiscriminate slaughter. 500 children were killed last summer in the Israeli bombing. That's the United States. The peace process is a sham. The United States either is unwilling or unable to challenge Israel in any serious way. So this is all we have left.
Are you still not convinced of who she serves?
Have you taken a position? Would you support moving the embassy from Tel Aviv into that consulate? It's really just a matter of changing a sign.
Absolutely.
Is that something would that be one of the actions we can take to repair the damage of that
Absolutely. Not only is that what Israel wants, but this Congress has also said that that's what they support.
The UN has been Israel bashing for decades, and what we are trying to do is make sure that they understand there's a new administration in town. We're not going to put up with it. We're going to have the backs of Israel every time they do this. We're going to have the backs of Israel every time they do this.
This is what you should sound like, Nikki.
I'm here to emphasize the United States is determined to stand up to the Israel bias. We will never repeat the terrible mistake. The double standards are breathtaking, and that's downright shameful.
Amazingly, we do agree on one thing.
Understand that by telling the truth and showing the power of your voice and putting action behind it, there's nothing we can't change.